There's two types of bread in the world. There's the kind that you buy. It's a sponge. It's white. You can put it in your car. You can leave it in there for a month. You can take it out and you can still eat it. And then there's the bread that's made by hand at your local baker. We're your local baker.
The Brewers Association says that a craft brewer is 6 million barrels or less. But they also go on to say about all malt flagship beers. They go on to say adjuncts used for flavoring and not for lightening the beer or for increasing alcohol. So I think there's a really clear kind of cut differentiator when you look at the ingredients.
Setting an example.
Let me introduce Stasis real quick.
The big three, Miller, Coors, Bud, they're good at what they do. They make a good beer that's American light lager. That's the style, and they do a good job making it. Preferably not my style, but to each their own.
There you go, enjoy. They're technically probably the most knowledgeable brewers around. They have PhDs in brewing sciences. They're very, very knowledgeable brewers, but they might not have the passion about it, and they don't get to make exactly what they want to make. It seems what really sets us apart from those guys is this whole just giant community around it, from the bars, the craft bars that go out of their way to support the local breweries, to the people that will go in and say, what's local is the first question they'll ask, and try it out and be willing to always try something new.
If you think about it, you spend so much money on just a mainstream beer, and then for $1 or $2 more, you get a really good craft beer. So why not spend that kind of money on a good, well-balanced beer with lots of flavor?
In '95, there was a burgeoning craft movement in Texas at the time. It was just kind of beginning to start, but it was sort of a false start. It didn't really catch. A few years ago, things started coming around. Little breweries started springing up again, and people embraced it. And I personally believe that people are interested in flavor. They're interested in the story behind what they're drinking and want to know where it came from. People are really interested in local.
Hey guys, I'm Ivy from the Austin Chronicle. I just want to know, why now and not 15 years ago? Why now?
I couldn't drink 15 years ago.
There's so many things about Austin that make it a fantastic place to open a brewery. It's a fantastic place for craft beer just in general.
Geographically, it's in a very good place to create a craft beer business.
There's a place opening up down the street from us, brewers from Colorado, and I'm sure he's thinking, well, I'm moving to Texas, not giving up the mountains and all this for Waco, Austin's got more to offer.
Plenty of outdoor activities, places to get out, ride a bike, hike, backpack, walk, museums to get out and see, a lot of art, a lot of culture, a lot of good food.
The consumer scene here is incredible. They want to drink local beer, they want to drink great local beer.
Yeah. There's a lot of people from a lot of other places. It's a very artistic and creative environment in Austin.
It's an educated population. It's a population that has traveled quite a bit. It's a population that has a little more disposable income.
I think Austin benefits from being Austin. I think Austin just has a different energy.
It's been that way with music, politics, everything in Austin is a little bit livelier than in most places.
I think people tend to sort of latch onto the cliches when they're describing Austin, like laid back or weird or something like that, but it's really more that Austin is energetic and creative and curious. And that's what makes Austin such a great place for our scene.
I started Pecan Street Lager in 1987. The name of the company was Old City Brewing Company. We were the first craft beer in Austin. It was in that style of Sam Adams. I ran into Jim Cook at one of the craft brewers conferences we had here in Austin. He's walking down the hall and he sees me and goes, "Davis Tucker, one of the original crazies." And it was true. When I got into business, I just didn't know any better than to do it. People say, "So how'd you get into business?" Like, didn't know I couldn't. Pecan Street True Bock came along in '89, and the reason we called it Pecan Street True Bock was because it really was a traditional style German Bock, and obviously to set it apart from Shiner Bock. It was a tough road, because Shiner Bock in people's minds back then, again, we're talking, 1989, people thought that's what a Bock beer was, and they were trying to constitute true Bock, and we're going, well, this isn't a Bock beer. It's like, well, yes, in fact, it is.
Shiner Bock was not a heavy dark beer, but it was something different. I got thrown out of more places than you can imagine trying to sell Shiner to bars in this town, but eventually they came around and it was all good. And Shiner Bock and Austin just kind of grew up together. Early to mid-90s, my partner and I felt like brewing was the place to go next. But as you know, in Texas you can't do that, because if you're a wholesaler, distributor, you can't also manufacture. So it turns out I was able to get my brother interested in brewing. So we contracted with him to brew beer for us. We built our brew house from scratch, 60-barrel brew house, and bought a bunch of used horizontal dairy tanks that we used as fermenters.
Because Marshall had all the connections from Shiner, they were everywhere in Texas. That beer was saturated. So we made a lot of beer.
We brewed 4 different styles of beer at Hill Country Brewing and Bottling. We had Balcones Fault Red Granite, Pale Malt, Bat's Breath Bock, and then we did a kind of a cider style called Apple Ale.
We brewed at least twice a week, 60 barrels at a time. It was a big job. It was a lot of fun, though. That's really where I fell in love with actually craft brewing at a large scale. Celis is one of my heroes. He was an excellent brewer, one of the greats in modern brewing.
I love his story. You know, started off in the milk business in Belgium, and then brought back and saved the Belgian white style of beer.
He resurrected a beer style, you know, that the white was gone, and he brought that back.
He revived the Belgian-style wheat beer in Hoegaarden. In 1966, the big breweries, they told him, Pierre, are you crazy? You're gonna compete with us? Everybody drinks Pilsner to begin with. Why would you even do that? It's like, well, that's the reason why. People wanted something different. People wanted to have a craft beer, a full flavor beer from a small brewery that was made with heart and soul. So he outgrew his brewery at his home, and then he bought another building and made it into a bigger brewery. And then in 1985, a disaster struck, and half of his brewery was destroyed by a fire. And then the biggest brewery of Belgium came to him and said, you know, Pierre, we'll help you rebuild the brewery. And they did, and it went great. But when you are a bigger company, the priority is about, you know, money. And so for him, quality was always first. So they didn't see eye to eye all the time. But instead of retiring, he said, screw that, I'm not gonna retire. I'm gonna start another brewery in the United States.
He said that he chose Austin because, you know, it was very much like where he was used to brewing in Belgium.
The water is filtered through limestone, which is the same as in Hoegaarden, which we need for the Belgian wheat beer. And he always said, well, one other reason why I like to go to Austin, Texas is because they talk slow. I can understand what they're saying. At that time, we were still in that educational phase. People didn't know what those copper kettles were. When we brought those in, people thought that we were starting a pharmaceutical industry. And we're like, no, this is a brewery, this is gonna be fun. You're gonna see, you know, some smoke coming out of the kettles, this is gonna be beer.
He made excellent, amazing beer, but he was also an excellent, amazing person. The fact that he was here in Austin allowed us to have a touchstone for what quality craft brewing really means, and the tradition of it, and the technique of it, and the heart and soul of it. And he embodied all those things.